FactsVerse presents Bent trees in the forest hold a centuries-old secret. If you've ever walked through the forest, you know that most trees look alike. They stand tall, they have leaves, so this is why it's so easy to get lost in the forest. If you hike through the forest long enough, you could come upon trees with crooked trunks and cakes. If you find a bent tree in the forest, you may have just stumbled upon a centuries-old secret. Dennis Downs grew up near Lake Michigan, which is located on the border of Wisconsin and Illinois. He had a love of nature since he was very young. When he was a kid, he spent most of his time playing in the forest near his home. In this forest, there were trees that were unlike most other trees around them. The trees had a very weird appearance. Just a few feet from the ground, there was a kink in the trunk. The angle of the trunk was so sharp that the bulge ran parallel to the ground. There was another bend in the tree which gave it its U shape. These trees were very strange to look at, and obviously they stood out over the rest. Many people who've seen these trees wonder why they look this way. Did Mother Nature cause these trees to appear deformed? Some people believe that theory, while others have another theory. These people believe that the elements caused the trees to become deformed when they were just saplings. The young trees were contorted and then they grew to be deformed. These people believe that nature didn't have the power to cause that type of deformity. There is one other theory about how the trees grew this way, and Dennis believes that theory. It's said that the Native Americans created trees this way on purpose to help them find their way through the forests. Dennis heard these stories about the Native Americans when he was very young, and they stuck with them for their entire lives. When he got older, he wanted to know more about these trees. When he was in his early 20s, he wanted to find evidence to back up those stories that he heard growing up. It wasn't long before he began to find some type of evidence that these stories may actually have been true. When Dennis grew up, he was working as a painter and sculptor. While art was his passion, he never gave up on the mystery of the trees. He came across a report written by a geologist named Raymond Jansen. He decided that the best way to get to the bottom of the mystery was to follow in Jansen's footsteps. He was that determined to go everywhere the geologist went. This wasn't simple work either, and it didn't happen quickly. He followed Jansen's work for over 40 years. When the geologist was working in Illinois in the 1930s and 40s, he, like Dennis, became intrigued by these odd-shaped trees. He became so fascinated with them that he started to study these trees across 13 of the 50 states in the U.S. During the course of his research, he set guidelines regarding exactly what was unique about each of these trees. During the course of his research, Jansen wrote 4 papers based on his research of the trees. In one report, he noted, "The casual observer views them merely as deformed freaks. Careful observation and comparison of the nature of the deformities indicate that these trees did not acquire their unusual shape by accident." Downs used this report and Jansen's many others as the starting point for his own investigation. He began going down several other avenues to figure out the secret of the trees. It wasn't long before he was finding his own clues. During his research, he found evidence about these marker trees and others that were in the forest before they were removed. Downs finally came to the conclusion that it was the Native Americans and they shaped the trees this way deliberately. Years before, the Native Americans used these strange-looking trees as milestones in the forest. They would use these trees to help guide them through the forest to the rivers and other freshwater sources. These trees were the world's first GPS navigation systems. The Native Americans used the information from these trees as a means of survival. These trees meant the difference between eating and starving to death. They also helped determine the best place to cross the rivers safely. He also believes that the kink in the tree is so close to the forest floor because it was a person who manipulated the trees to look that way. The age of the trees needed to be taken into account as well. In order for the theory to be correct, the trees would need to have been alive since Native American tribes were known to populate the area. His best evidence came from a man named Earl Ochsenwanegan. The man was a Smithsonian advisor who had witnessed a tree being shaped by a septuagenarian tribal elder in 1933. The man agreed to take Downs to the site where that occurred. Sadly, these markers are not as common as they once were. By the 20th century, many forests had been bulldozed down to make room for roads, highways, and commercial developments. These oddly shaped trees are between 150 and 200 years old. Sadly, they won't survive much longer, and there's no protection order in place to preserve them. There's no strategy to protect them from disease or falling during extreme weather. Currently, there is a project called the Trail Tree Project run by the Mountain Stewards. They've created a database with over 2,000 of these unique trees across the United States. The group also released a documentary and a book which featured interviews with Native Americans. They explained that these trees were manipulated intentionally to help them get around the forest. They're also working to preserve the trees so that they can live for another 100 or 200 years. Subscribe for more!